you've seen the movie Toy Story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna see.
What do you mean I've seen the movie Toy Story?
You've seen the movie Toy Story.
Yeah, of course I have. I'm not living under a rock.
You're not living under a rock. So you acknowledge you've seen the movie Toy Story.
Yes.
Okay, so in Toy Story, Buzz Lightyear at one point ends up in the possession of a small girl who his arm falls off. He ends up in her possession, and she dresses him up in a little dress and a hat, and she starts calling him.
Wait, 1 second. Okay, keep talking.
Okay, I'm gonna start over.
Mm-hmm.
So in the movie Toy Story, featuring the animated toys from Toy Story, Woody and Buzz, and Slinky Dog and Potato Head, and Rex, and Little Bo Peep, and other funs. There's a scene where Buzz Lightyear jumps off of a thing and his arm falls off, and he gets taken in by a little girl who dresses him up in an apron and a hat and starts calling him Mrs. Nesbit.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. That's how that ties into this book. That's how it ties into this book. Because Nesbit. But whenever I hear Edith Nesbit's name, I think of Mrs. Nesbit and Buzz Lightyear drunk on tea. And then he goes, "I'm Mrs. Nesbit," and he bangs the table. That's it. That's all I had to add. Was it worth it?
No.
Was that a long try? Was that a good story? Did I do good?
No.
Hey everyone, I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And it's Del Toro time.
It's Del Toro time.
It's terrible. It's just terrible. I hate it so much.
It's terrible on your end. It's fine terrible. On my end.
It is terrible on my end. I hate it. Like it makes me realize that we are far away but so close.
We are so close. 10 minutes.
Yeah, we're about 10 minutes away by car. It's not very far. But by technology, we're pretty far. If this is any indication.
Charrington.
A whole jar.
Charrington.
Have you read this book?
Yeah.
John Charrington, Charrington's Wedding, by Edith Nesbit, and it's a short one.
Yeah, 6 pages.
Yeah, a swift 6 pages. This one does not waste any time.
Wastes just about as much time as the other one that was not wasting any time.
I read this book, the story out loud to Mitzi last night while she finished her dinner. Like that's how breezy a tale it is, and fairly family friendly as well.
I read this story when I woke up at 12 today.
And it's still fresh in your mind.
Yep.
And it's pretty much a classic. It's just a ghost story. Like this is a story that you would tell around a campfire. It's that kind of tale.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me about Edith Nesbit?
Nothing.
Would it surprise you if I told you that she spent her entire life being screwed around by a man?
No.
Yeah, she really, not her entire life. Her husband died and she got remarried to a much better man. But her first husband, he was a real piece of work, as they say. And by piece of work, I mean piece of work. He was a real piece of work. So Edith Nesbit was born in 1858 in England, but she moved around a lot with her family because her sister was sick, and it was that time of like, if you're really sick, if you've got like some kind of tubercular disease, just move to a new location and hope for the best. But it didn't work. Her sister.
I mean, sometimes it worked for some people because they left the house that was full of asbestos and moved to the countryside and got some air.
They didn't have asbestos in 1858.
Yes, they did.
It was just ghouls. They were haunted.
They left the house full of asbestos. Went to the countryside. The person got better. They went back and the person died.
Yes, if your illness is caused by environmental issues like black mold, say, or other things in your house, or like in my case with work, every time I have to go work in my office at like my specific desk, I spend the day just sick because there is something environmentally that causes me to feel terrible. I have felt
maybe it's those terrible lights.
It's the terrible lights. It's something in the air. Like I get a headache and I get like nose running. I'm allergic to something in the office, and I'm so glad I don't have to go back to my desk every single day. But so they moved around a lot. Her sister ended up dying anyway. But when she was 18 years old, she met a 21-year-old dude by the beautiful name of Hubert Already it's a good name. Hubert Bland. Yeah. Hubert Bland. He was a bank clerk, and they fell in love. I don't know. All I know is that Edith got knocked up, and when she was like 7 months pregnant, they got married. So it may not come as much of a surprise to you that she was not the only person Hubert Bland was engaged to, or the only person that Hubert Bland had knocked up in that time period. The craziest part was that at one point, Edith's best friend got knocked up by a guy and was like, "Can I move in with you, and you can adopt my child, and I can like live with you guys, because this child, I don't want this child to grow up without a family." And so Edith was like, "Sure, of course, Alice," that's her name, "Alice, you can move in with us." So Alice moves in, and then she's like, "Oh, by the way, it was your husband who knocked me up." And so Edith was like, "Get out of my house and take your kid with you." And then Hubert was like, "If you kick Alice out, I will leave you and our 3 children." And so Edith Nesbit was like, "Fine." And so Alice became their housekeeper, and Edith and her husband ended up adopting that child. And they also adopted the other child that the woman had with her husband, Hubert Bland. It's a pretty rough marriage, it sounds like. And apparently Hubert was not much of a worker. So that's one of the reasons Edith started writing so much, is to support the family. Back in the day when you can be like, "We need to eat. Guess I'll become a famous children's author," which is what she did. They were also socialists. They helped found a major, the Fabian Society, which still exists today. She and her husband were among the founders of the Fabian Society. They were socialists and Marxists, and that may account for one of the reasons why her children's books, though incredibly popular in the UK, never really hit it big in America. Have you ever read any children's books by Edith Nesbit?
I don't know.
She wrote 5 Children and It. Not about 5 children and a clown called It, though. It's about children who find like a fairy and like a fairy creature, like a weird creature. And that was a series. She wrote The Story of the Treasure Seekers. She wrote The Railway Children. She wrote The Magic City, The Enchanted Castle. Just tons of books and short stories for children. But also 4 volumes of horror stories. So, and that's what we're touching on today. She was also well known for writing ghost stories, horror stories, weird tales, a form of fiction that was very much at the time very much written by women, although they have been largely forgotten in our modern era, and only recently have major collections of ghost stories and weird fiction from the 19th century by women started really coming out, because there was a lot of them, and Edith Nesbit was one of them. Today she is celebrated. Like every single British children's author is like, yeah, Edith Nesbit's my primary influence. Like every single one of them. I think it's because even though she was writing about fairies and stuff, she wrote children with real psychology, as opposed to the most important thing is sort of like the fantastical land. It's like, that's important, but also like making sure these kids are very realistic and that you have kids that readers can relate to. So that's kind of what Edith Nesbit was known for. And you see her influence carried on down. But that has nothing to do with the story we're reading today. John Charrington's something or other. John Charrington's
wedding.
I keep wanting to say John Charrington's marriage, which is definitely not what it's about, because as you'll see, he doesn't end up having much of a marriage at all. So Willow, thank you for sitting through my brief rundown of Edith Nesbit. What is John Charrington's wedding about?
So there's a guy named John Charrington who always gets what he wants.
He does.
Just by saying it. And our narrator's like, okay. Our narrator's just boring. He's just a boring guy. No one cares about him.
All we know about him is that his name is Jeffrey.
Yep. He keeps asking this woman to marry him. She keeps saying no, and suddenly she says yes. And he's very excited. They're very excited. Everyone's excited. Then John gets like a letter or something from a guy who like raised him or did right by him. His godfather. Yeah. Who's like dying, so he goes to visit. And everyone's like, you better be back in time for your wedding. And he's like, haha, don't worry about it. And so he leaves, and then our narrator's supposed to pick him up from the train station. He never shows up, so the narrator just goes to the wedding, and somehow he's there. And then They get married and everyone dies.
Okay, they get married and he disappears.
And his wife dies.
Like a week later.
No.
But she dies.
She dies right after.
No, they bring her into the house and it says she didn't last a week.
Oh, I misread that. I read that she died on the way to the house.
Because it says, it says that all that they find is like a bundle of silks or whatever on the ground. Like they don't even say it's her. They just say, at first I thought it was just her clothes left behind.
I think she was dead and they waited a week to bury her.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It is vague. I guess you could also that interpretation could also be correct. Yeah, because it says before a week was over, they laid her beside her husband in our little churchyard on the thyme-covered hill, the churchyard where they kept their love tryst. So yeah, I guess yeah, she could have also died. The long and short of it being, regardless, they never. Well, okay, so we skimmed over what exactly happened. So you're right. Like that's a pretty succinct summation of the story. John Charrington gets everything he wants, but he's not a jerk. I mean, no more than any of the other guys in the story. Like he and May seem to be genuinely in love with each other.
Yeah.
Like she loves him, and they like the narrator discovers that they have been like having these like romantic trysts, as he says, like in the graveyard. Like that's why his friends never saw them courting with each other, because they were always in the graveyard just hanging out together and just enjoying each other's company. So I mean, John Charrington he's very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Confident. Just like, I get it. That's be fine. Everything will be fine. I guess if he's that friend though that everything always seems to work out really well for, just because they're really confident.
Yeah.
And in a way he is, and in that way he is the worst person.
Who's that friend in your friend group?
I'm not going to call out my friends.
You can tell me afterwards.
It's me.
Yeah.
It's me. I mean, I did have the reputation for a while of everything just kind of working out, even though I didn't really try that hard, just by me just being like, whatever, and it'll be fine, and just being people like, man, everything just kind of happens for you. But the real truth of that is I just set my expectations very low and acted super happy whenever anything happened. It's not that I got everything I wanted. It's just that I only said I wanted things that I kind of knew were already possibilities which I guess if you want to come across as the kind of guy who gets everything he wants, only announce that you want things that you know you're probably most likely to get. There you go. That's John Charrington. How to be a John Charrington.
Yeah, because he could have just been saying that he was going to marry her after he has been courting her for a while.
That's probably what he did. That's probably why she turned down everyone, because she's like, I'm already seeing John. Because like in the story, they're like, everyone wanted this woman. She was beautiful, but they didn't really want to marry her. They were like, she's so beautiful, she's cool, and it just sort of became a game. Like every guy would be like, go out with me, and she'd be like, oh you. Come to find out though, John was really putting in the moves on her and working his way in there. Yeah, in a respectful way. He wasn't a player. He was no Hubert Bland. I want to see, is there a picture of Hubert Bland? Like, what if he's like
He worked as a bank man. There's no way he's anything more than completely average.
Oh my God, the picture of him on Wikipedia is like, imagine a bank manager from the 1800s, and it's exactly what you're thinking. He has like slicked hair part in the middle, a weird little mustache, and a monocle, and he's staring.
Yeah, he has a monocle.
He's staring straight at you like you came to work late. Look at the known for. Read it out loud.
He was known for being what?
Under his photo on Wikipedia, it says known for.
Yeah, right? That's where he was known for being an infamous libertine, a journalist, an early English socialist, and one of the founders of the Fabian Society.
No. Under his photo, it says born
by... socialism, writings, and infidelity.
Yep. Known for socialism, writings, infidelity. And I guess, he had a, quote, voracious sexual appetite, I would say. He smoked. He claimed to be adventurous with drugs, having taken opium in all its forms, as well as other drugs. He hated the Pharisees, the prigs, and the Puritans. He sounds like that guy who's like, no, man, I'm super liberated. But all that means is like, I get to sleep with whoever I want.
And I hate anyone who has different religious beliefs than me.
Yeah, he had a heart attack. Apparently he joined the Catholic Church.
He had a heart attack.
Yeah, it didn't kill him though. It just made him go blind.
When did he die?
He died in 1914 at the age of 59. So, relatively young. But yeah, he was a writer.
Well, yeah, because his wife remarried.
Yeah. Adventurous with drugs, though. Yeah, but she was only 3 years younger than him. She remarried at 56. Like, that's pretty.
Yeah, I know.
Pretty solid. She was super respected. Like, people liked Edith Nesbit a lot. But okay, so what were we talking about? Oh yeah. So John Charrington was not a Hubert Bland. He was not a player. He loved May, and they got engaged. But and it's a short story. You don't really find out a whole lot about him. Yeah, his godfather gets sick and is like, "Come to me, come see me." And he's like, "Don't worry about it." But if you're paying attention, throughout the story, he's like, "Don't worry, May, we're going to get together, whether I'm dead or alive." Like, nothing can keep me from our wedding, not even death, May. And you're like, all right, we get it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you find out that he gets killed. He gets thrown from a dog cart on his way to the train station. He breaks his neck. But then he shows up at the wedding. And when I read this to Mitzi, she was like, how did he get to the wedding? How did he get to the wedding?
He's a ghost.
Right, but she was like, did he take the train as a ghost and nobody could see him? And that's why John Charrington didn't see him?
No, he has his connection to if we're talking ghost rules here, his only connection to the mortal plane at this point was the wedding. So he just sort of appeared there.
So he just appeared at the wedding.
Yeah, it was like he was haunting the wedding.
But he was in physical form. Like, people...
Ghosts can do that.
He could touch his wife. He was physically there.
Yeah, ghosts can do that.
And he actually had a wound. He had like a wound over his eye, apparently from where he hit the ground. His clothes were dirty. So when you are
ghosts
dead,
can do that.
When you come back as a dead person, are you? He almost seems half zombie.
No,
because he doesn't speak. He just walks, and people
doesn't
are like,
he speak? He has to say, "I do."
I guess he does have to say. He doesn't. We never hear him say anything. They're just like, and he ignores everyone when he walks in. Oh, because there's one other character.
He's haunting the wedding.
He is the wedding. It's John Charrington's wedding.
But he's haunting it.
Is he?
Because that's what he's doing. He's haunting the wedding.
Well, there's a character named Biles, who's the gardener, who sort of fills us in on what happened. And he's like, everyone thinks this guy's drunk. And we know this guy can hold his drink. We've seen him drink, so there's something going on with him. He showed up here. He's a mess. He's not talking to anyone, and he's just going through the motions. And so he and May get married, and she looks like death warmed over when she comes out of the churchyard. Everyone's there. They're getting ready to throw rice and slippers, which I love, because apparently you used to throw slippers at weddings. And I'm like, where'd they get the slippers? Like, do you buy the slippers? Are they special wedding slippers that are like kind of cheap, but they look nice enough that you can throw them? Wedding slippers. But then we ended up tying shoes to the backs of cars, and maybe that's like what ended it. We're like, we'll just tie them to the backs of the car. So everyone brings their shoes to throw, but they never get a chance because they're just like, ugh. Oh, and there's the bell ringers who are supposed to ring the wedding bells, but when they pull the bell cord to ring the wedding bell, for some reason the funeral bells ring, and that kind of puts a damper on everything.
Yep.
People are like, dudes, what are you doing? That's not funny. And they're like, nah, 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 and they run away. That's my favorite part. It's when the bell ringers are like, it's a ghost. And they take off for the hills. So John Charrington and May then get in the carriage. May's father and the narrator, Jeffrey, get into the father's carriage. And they're like, get ahead of their carriage. We got to get home before they do. So they zip to his house. When the bride's carriage arrives, John Charrington is gone, and she is, in your interpretation, dead on the ground, dead on the floor of the carriage. Her face, she looks like the person who just like saw The Ring in the movie The Ring. She has like this terror look on her face. She's white, her hair is white, and they're like, damn, I guess John Charrington got his wedding just like he said. And so the question I have for you is, what killed May? Like, at what point?
Terror?
At what point, though, was her fate sealed?
Probably as soon as John Charrington walked into the wedding area.
Do you think she was compelled to marry him? Like, do you think that there was something going on besides just his ghost returning? Like,
no.
The force of his will, the fact that he always gets what he wants, like the fact that she is terrified as they leave it's not like she was like, my husband, we got married, and then she gets in the carriage and that's when she finds out he's a ghoul. Like, she knows something's up as soon as she gets married. Is she like powerless to stop herself at this point? I'm just asking for like, I'm just talking. Like, I don't have an idea. I'm just like, it's a curious story.
No idea. Maybe not. Maybe she's like, I just want to get this wedding over with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where this story edges from just a ghost story into the weird a little bit, because typically these stories don't result in death if a loved one returns. Like if a loved one returns to like have one final meeting with their like spouse or fiance, that's usually a good thing. But this ends up taking a major left. Like you would expect, like, and they got married and then he disappeared and she like lived, like sadly ever after. But no, like it kills his wife. So I think that's where this stuff gets kind of ooky and kooky in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't have any like.
I mean, for all we know, she just died of a heart attack.
Why'd she look so scared then?
Because she saw a ghost.
I guess what I'm saying is, I guess I'm not making myself clear. She already knew he was a ghost when she got in the carriage. What?
Did she?
Well, she looked terrible when they left. Like she was like,
well, like yeah, I would look terrible too if my future husband came to the wedding covered in blood, with a wound on his forehead. I'd be like, should we stop the wedding?
I guess like it says, there was dust on his coat. His hair was disarranged. He was deathly pale, but his pallor was not greater than that of the bride, who might have been carved in ivory. Dress, veil, orange blossoms, face, and all.
Maybe she was already dead at that point.
I'm just wondering, I'm wondering what, like, beyond find out he's dead, like, to me, like, there was something, he revealed something in that, like, she saw something in that carriage that was beyond just, like, your husband is dead. It was...
Maybe it wasn't her husband. Maybe it was something else.
Ooh, like something else, like that took his form?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Some kind of like ghoul waiting for the right body to come back in, or as.
Mm-hmm. Like this whole story is about this woman that everyone lusts after. Mm-hmm. At least like partially. Wouldn't be that far-fetched to think like maybe there was some demon or something that wanted her as well. Maybe
some fairy.
Maybe.
I like going.
It's always the fairies.
It's always the fairies. Yeah, I mean, there could be some shapeshifter who shows up and is like, "Hey, I'm back," and she's like, "All right, let's do this." And then they get into the carriage, and the shapeshifter's like, "Oh, by the way, this isn't what I look like," and then turns into something the human mind can't comprehend, and her brain explodes. Like it could just be something as simple as that.
I mean, weddings in face stories are always complicated because it's a pact that you're making with a fairy,
right?
And like once you make a pact with a fairy, you can't really get out of it.
That's true. We've built on additional lore to an old Edith Nesbit story, and now it's better. So yep. Our narrator is like, well, that's what happened at John Charrington's wedding. Hope you enjoyed it. And we don't that because it just ends right there. We don't really find out if like, I don't know, like who did the narrator did the narrator move? Like how did the rest of their friends feel about this? It just all kind of sucked for everyone. And then like you could move on with your life. But it does make for a fun, just a fun little ghost story. Like it's a fun little ghost story. It's a little chilling. It's a little like ghoulish. Mm-hmm. And then you're done. You go on with your life. You clear up the dinner table dishes and you get ready for bed. It's never been adapted into a film or anything, but it was included. What's his name? Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee did a reading of it in. I'm just looking for the Christopher Lee's Fireside Tales. Was a show on the BBC Radio 4, where Christopher Lee read or recounted like famous ghost stories. And it's mostly like The Monkey's Paw, The Raven, but also John Charrington's wedding was included in this collection. And that's really it as far as adaptations go, which surprises me. You would think that this one would have been like, I don't know, turned into a TV special or something. Like it's a spooky little tale that can be told in about a half an hour. So somebody out there, please adapt John Charrington's wedding for me. I would really appreciate it.
Why don't you adapt it?
Why don't I adapt it?
Yeah.
How? Like with...
I don't know. You know people. You have actor friends.
With a bunch of my friends?
You've directed before. Yeah, if you want to.
I don't have any friends. Maybe I could do
That's a damn lie.
That was John Charrington's wedding. And that's, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add about it? Like any?
I like our version better.
Oh, that he was actually not John Charrington at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I agree. We are better writers than Edith Nesbit.
Not true.
So what is the next story? Oh, by the way, this is the Dark Descent. We're covering the stories from the Dark Descent collection by David G. Harwell. We are right now in the Color of Evil section where was this evil? This is from the Color of Evil.
Well, she was brutally killed at the end.
She was killed at the end.
And if we're going with it wasn't John Charrington, then yeah.
Yeah, pretty evil. I would say, like, up until she dies, it's a little confusing as to what even is malevolent about this, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh no. And then it becomes...
And even if it was him, it's almost if I can't have you, no one can scenario.
Yeah, it's somewhat worse. It's that whole thing of like, no, you don't understand. I always get what I want.
Yeah.
And now I get to marry you, and now I get you in death. Even though he, again, wasn't portrayed as a jerk in real life. He seemed like a nice enough guy. It's like his force of will was so strong that brother's going to get what he wants. So what's our next story?
What?
What's our next story?
Styx.
By?
Carl Edward Wagner.
Carl Edward Wagner. A writer whose work I am absolutely not familiar with. I know he did a bunch of he did stuff in the Conan universe. But this story, Styx, apparently, just from what little I know about it, which is the title and what it says on the ISFDB, is part of
an overtly Lovecraftian story of historical and cosmic evil.
Yep,
a forbidden knowledge piece.
It is included in several tales of like Lovecraft and tales of the Cthulhu Mythos collection. So this story, okay, we'll talk about it next week, but it's included in the Book of Cthulhu and in the Book of Zombies. So it's included in several Cthulhu Mythos books and several zombie collections. So I am very curious as to where this falls on the old horror meter.
I assume zombies and Cthulhu.
The zombies versus Cthulhu? Huh?
That would be an amazing story.
There's a collection called Shotguns versus Cthulhu, which is like action tales set in the Cthulhu universe. It's actually very good. So I would watch Zombies versus Cthulhu.
Do they shoot him with shotguns?
No, they don't. They don't actually do that. It's sort of just say like these are not into like cerebral tales of creeping horror. They're more like the world has gone to hell with Cthulhu creatures. They're more action oriented, and they're actually some very good tales in there. But next week's story is going to drop the week of Halloween, so I guess if we can get some Cthulhu and zombies in there, it's going to be a fun one. All right, so this was. It's Del Toro time. Goodbye. That's not how we end the show.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. So join us next time for David Wagner to Wagner. Carl Edward Wagner. Carl Edward Wagner.
Styx.
We look forward to seeing you there. I am Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And we'll see you when it's Del Toro time.
Del Toro time.